87% of people are going to Google you before they reach out. And so, 20 years ago, if you had a referral, they're out to dinner with their friends and they're talking about, hey, business is going great. We want to buy our forever home. Like, hey, you got to reach out to Tom. Before they would have had a stack of business cards in their car and they would have just grabbed it and they would have just called. But everyone now wants to do their own due diligence, and their due diligence is now just a Google search. And so that's what kind of I wanted to do. Let me just share my screen real quick. I won't be in a slide deck this whole time. But especially right now, there's so much tech going on. Everyone's talking about the next best CRM and different things, but it's just kind of taking it back to the basics. And just, that online presence and kind of just presence in general and where people are doing the search. People are going to go to Zillow, realtor.com, and all of that to find properties, but not necessarily to find real estate agents. And so we want to make sure that people can find, one, that you have a profile, but then also two, people can actually find your profile, and working with the, right naming structure and all of that. And especially, so many people are focused on lead generation, but then also where are they going to? So you're doing all this lead gen, and then if they're looking you up, is that consistent message and that consistent branding, telling them that, hey, this is the right business to reach out to. And so oftentimes, I've seen people that they have their Google business profile says temporarily closed. And that's the last thing that we want to do. You're getting people to that step and they just look that up and they think that you might be potentially closed. Especially with the market shift, things are changing a little bit, but people are doing a little bit more due diligence. They want to make sure that they are reaching out to the right agent just to help sell their home or look for when they're buying as well. And then there's also a couple other stats that matter. So the 87% of people will Google you before they call, but also with that, and why it's so important to have the Google business profile, is 73% of consumers will pick a business before even getting to your website. So I've talked to people that they've spent, thousands and thousands of dollars on a custom website, but they're still going to do their searches on the platforms that they prefer. Obviously you want to have a good looking website and kind of just cohesive with the rest of your branding, but it's all about that first impression. Kind of one of those biggest things to do is with the Google business profile. And then also just making sure once they're clicking on there, and also an easy way for them to find is recent reviews. And so 69% of consumers find relevant reviews, ideally that 2 to 3 month old and sooner. And then once you get those reviews, it's kind of just how do you respond? And so there's a lot of different things as well. And so kind of as Tom has mentioned before, the Google 3-pack, this is what that looks like. But there's a lot of different things as well. And so kind of Google business profile, online reviews, and there's also business listings or business citations. And we'll go a little bit in depth on all of that. I promise we won't be in here. We'll go live. And I'm doing kind of what I said most people aren't going to do. They're not going to go to Zillow and look for a real estate agent. They're going to go to Zillow to find properties, or realtor.com to find properties. And then they're going to get connected with people that are paying. But other agents will go to Zillow, and you guys might look at other people's pages, but the consumer, they're going to Google to do their search. I picked up Bellevue, Washington. That's where I'm from. I didn't want to call anyone out on the call, just and use their profile as an example, and if they happen to be on here. But you can see here. So up here for Zillow, these are people that are paying for the Zillow Premier Agent. And then there's also these people down here that they're just saying, hey, these are the agents to work with in Bellevue. And there's a handful of very high producing agents that are on here. But like I said, most people aren't going to be doing that, this search on here. And I looked up, okay, I can see their Google Business or their Zillow page, but then when I go look at their Google Business profile, is it still going to be the same? And so I did that same search. And so for how his profile is coming up, and you can see on Zillow, he has 653 reviews, but he only has 125 on Google. 125 is still amazing, but oftentimes I see this be, 3 reviews or 0 reviews. And so I'm going to do a little example, and hows is actually the good. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. The agent themselves is not ugly, but the profile is. And so we want to make sure when people first come to your page that that first impression really stands out and it makes them confident in them reaching out to you, and just being cohesive and helping, eventually getting that ranking up as well. because when someone's looking for a real estate agent in Bellevue, this whole list is different than what came up on Zillow. And so again, up here, these are Google ads. Uh, Most people know that and they want to skip over that. This is organic. They're not paying to be here. This is just who Google's picking out of all the agents in Bellevue. Once you click on here, again, top two are Google ads. Once you have a Google business profile, it allows you to be on here, which is Google Maps. And so, like I said, this is all organic. They're not paying to be in these specific spots. And this is just Google picking on who goes there. It's not a direct correlation on, hey, they have X amount of sales or even X amount of reviews, and it puts them in this position. There's a lot of different things that go into the ranking as well in the back end. So you can kind of see here, Chapman Homes, they have 68. They're beating out Howe with 125. And so reviews, obviously, the more you have, the stronger the profile is going to be, but it's also only 17% of that ranking system. And so there's a lot of different things on the profile and on the back end that Google's looking at that's going to affect that overall. And there's 20 profiles per page, and I'm sure you guys know when you're searching for things as well, most people don't go past the first one or two pages. And oftentimes, a handful of them are typically brokerages on there, but when people are searching, they want to see an actual agent versus I'm going to reach out to, just the Remax office and then get connected with one person. They would rather know, okay, I'm going to call Chad and I'm going to get a hold of Chad. And so for those of you that don't know, this is the Google Business Profile. Most people, they're going to have their own website that pulls up, maybe the brokerage, Zillow, Realtor.com, LinkedIn, all the typical stuff. But Google's done a good job training everyone's eyes to kind of come over here and look at the Google Business Profile. So if you don't have one, I'm just going to go in this class as if you do, and then it's kind of just taking it to the next level just to make sure that it's fully optimized. If you need help, setting up, obviously we can help, but there's also some great YouTube videos as well out there. But creating a Google Business Profile is absolutely free. And so every single one of you should have one. And so I would wait till after the class just to, if you are setting up, just to do that. But a couple things. So when people first come to your profile, this main photo should be your headshot, just because you guys are the brand. People want to work with you because of you. This home could be anyone. And so when people first come here, whether they met you at an open house and there was, 4 different agents that they met last Saturday, they're like, okay, I think his name is Chad. I can't really remember. Once they come to your profile and they see that headshot, be like, okay, yeah, this is exactly who I was thinking of. I feel confident in reaching out. And so ideally with having this be a headshot, or if you have a team, having a team photo, as a team, it's a little bit different, just with different naming structures and strategies. But ideally we want to be your headshot. But you can also see here, Hal's added in a ton of photos and he's done that strategically. And so still not enough, but ideally would like to have at least 100 or more photos on the Google Business Profile. And I know that sounds like a lot. The reason why I say 100, they've done studies across all the different pages and profiles that have 100 or more on average receive 512 times more calls than businesses without. And so luckily for real estate agents, pretty easy to get to that 100 mark, just a couple past listings and you can get there. Asking a dentist for 100 photos, it's a little bit more challenging. But like I said, having 100 photos, your headshot is the main photo, and then also a little logo here. So if you guys have your own personal logo, or just using the brokerage logo, but we want to have something in there, typically not another headshot, just because it's double headshots and it's super small, so you can't really see it. So ideally just an icon logo is what we like to see. And then as far as the naming structure, we always want to have first and last name in there. Luckily for How Dang, his is the How Dang real estate team, and so his first and last name is in there. But I'm going to kind of talk about it as if he was just an individual agent, and kind of similar naming structure that I would recommend that you would want to have. Just because, if it was just the Dang real estate team for How, no one's going to really be looking that up. They're going to be looking up How Dang. And so when people are doing the search for you, as much as you might think that they're looking up your branded name, it's a relationship business. So they're going to look you up by your first and last name. And so we want to ensure that that is in your Google Business Profile. And so kind of using him as an example. So obviously we want first and last name. And then also, if you guys are part of the Realtor Association, recommend putting that in the naming structure. just because realtor is about 7 times more search for and then real estate agent. And so it's a super common search, realtor near me, realtor in Appleton. So having that in the actual naming structure, your profile has a better chance of popping up. Uh, Google doesn't allow the trademark. And so with the association, they still do on in all caps. And so that's compliant with them. And then I sometimes like putting in the vertical bar and then how is with Windermere. And so, if you have first and last name, comma, realtor, the vertical bar kind of separates it. And then if you have the brokerage or if you have your team name that you want to throw in there. But that's kind of a similar naming structure that I'd recommend for most people to replicate. And then obviously, if you aren't part of the Realtor Association, just taking that off. But we always want to have first and last name in there. If you're, a couple and you, a husband and wife team or something like that, or two agents that work together, there's a couple different naming structures, and feel free to reach out after. We can chat a little bit more on what that looks like. And then I saw one thing in the chat just regarding how do you ensure the headshot stays on the main page. So this photo is referred to as the cover photo, and so that's what we want to have in there, is the cover photo. So you can upload just a regular photo, cover photo, and then also logo. And ideally, as far as headshots, the wider the photo is, the better. You can kind of see here, this is a square photo, but the wider, more rectangle it gets horizontally, it's going to take up a little bit more real estate. So if you have a super skinny, just vertical photo, this is going to be bigger and your headshot's going to be pretty small. So the wider the photo takes up a little bit more room. And then this, we can't control it. This is just Google Maps. And so obviously the smaller it is, the better. And then How has 125 Google reviews, which is amazing. But like I said, he has 653 on Google or on Zillow. And so this is the number that stands out when people are looking you up. And so having that on there. And then one thing with that as well is every single review that you get in, it's super important to respond to them. And so getting the review, obviously is challenging for some people to actually get them to do it. But once you get that, you want to make sure that you respond to every single one. So for Google, it's just a check mark. They like seeing that interaction, but also it's your chances that business profile to show a little bit more personality as well. So ideally like to have at least 2 to 3 sentences on there. And the more in-depth and personal you can be, the better. You don't have to share anything like, hey, I'm glad your parents gifted you the $10,000 so we could actually close. But just going a little bit more in depth just lets them know that, your clients. It wasn't just some big team and they got passed around. So you were the one helping them. And then hopefully you never get one. But a lot of people filter by lowest first. And so it's even more important to respond to the bad reviews than just the good ones. And I typically recommend just getting the review on Google versus, some people will send them to Zillow, some people will send them to Facebook, Yelp, Google, but I recommend personally just sending them to Google just because that's where people are going to be doing their search. And every single review that you get is now a keyword on your profile. And so I just added in the word top, and this whole list just changed. And so Google's going to pull out specific reviews that people have left for you. And so Aqua, it wasn't over the top. And, that just because I added the word top, they pulled out that specific review and it brought them way higher. Or they'll look at different things and they have the best interest. And so they know top and best is a synonym. And so they pull out that review. And so if you have a special niche that you service, whether it's, relocation, first-time home buyer, VA, FH, whatever it is, and someone's leaving that review on your Google page and someone's searching for that, your profile now has a better chance of being found versus having that review on Zillow. It's not necessarily doing that same work for you. And then also, if you send them to multiple spots, if you have Zillow and Google and it's the same copy, sometimes Google will look at that as potential spam as well, and they might take the review down. And so Google likes unique reviews, and they've never been going through the removal of reviews as well as much as they have been. So they want authentic ones. And so just having it from actual clients, not necessarily other people that work in the industry leaving a review for you, that has a potential to get taken down as well. So want to make sure it's from actual clients that you're having real estate conversations with, but having those consistent flow of reviews come in as well. And then as far as hours too, typically recommends not 9 to 5. We want broad hours just because, if you get done with dinner and they're looking you up, we want to make sure if it's, 6 p.m. that they see that you're open. If it is 9 to 5 for you, that's great. But I always look at it when you're comfortable receiving a phone call, not necessarily when you're at the office or behind your computer. And so, good example of that would be 8 to 8. And so if they get done at dinner, and even the 24 hours, sometimes it's not very clear. And so, they get done at dinner at 7:30. They're like, all right, this is kind of late. It says 24 hours. Are they really open 24 hours? But if it says, hey, give me a call until 8, you feel confident. All right, I can reach out until then. But it also sets some boundaries, like don't call me at 2 a.m. And then obviously just a cell phone number and having that in there. And then there's a lot of different things that are on the profile itself. And so there's a section down here for Google Post or Google Updates. And so it's not like your traditional social media. People can't go comment and like on it. But Google likes to see that activity. And so they always like to see posts at least once a week. And so having that on the actual Google business profile, and then always a call to action. And so we typically recommend, this is a good spot too if you have new listings or an open house, or you can have different events, putting that on here as well. But typically like to stay away from emojis and also hashtags. Google doesn't, not a huge fan of that. And then there's other things as well that are on the profile, and Hal's actually kind of missing some of these. So there's a Q&A spot. Let me just pull up one of our clients. And so here's a good example as far as posts that are just more generic. You don't have to have listings always that you're constantly putting on there, but Google likes to see that consistency. So at least once a week is kind of that consistency that they like to see. And then there's also a section for an appointment link. So if you guys use any calendar booking services like Calendly, it's a great spot to put that in there. If not, just your contact page on your website is totally fine. But the more filled out the profile is, the more Google likes it, and all of that. We're trying to just help them. And so there's also the Q&A spot. And Google knows, if someone has a question, they're probably just going to call you. They're not going to go on your Google page, wait for you to respond. So they actually recommends that we proactively go in here and ask the questions ourselves. And so they like to see 10. We do 11 just since we're overachievers. But it's, generic questions. Do I need to stage my home? Who pays for a home inspection? What does selling a home as is mean? The common real estate questions, not necessarily what's the average days on market, what's the price per square foot. That's constantly changing. And then so we go in there, ask the questions ourselves, and then we also answer them. So it has all the real estate keywords on the profile. And then there's also, just a good bio. There's 750 characters. Want to make sure that that's fully maxed out. And then there's also a spot down here for products. And your typical products, people think, real estate, what am I selling? And they want to put, their listings here. And then, uh, you know, after a certain amount of time, depending on the IDX that you're using in the platform, the URL goes dead. And so then it becomes a dead link. And that's the last thing that we want with Google. And so you can kind of see here, How's posted a couple different photos and he's doing a good job. And we refer to them, as I mentioned, evergreen products. And so we always like to put a little photo on here with the title. And then it's stuff that you always offer. You always offer home buyer consultations, home seller consultations. If you guys use any services like HomeBot or anything that has like a custom home analysis, we always like to put a little photo here with the title and then a little bit more in-depth description. So it has all the real estate keywords plus a backlink. So whether that's just sending people to your main website, or if you had a specific landing page that you wanted to send people to, or if you even had like an IDX site that's, set up for all new construction homes or all, single story homes that you have, or a listing or landing page that takes people to all your active listings, that's a good way to do it versus constantly having to go in here, create a new product, or remember to take it down after, all right, 24 hours, it's now pending. I need to mark it to sold or whatever. And so just having the evergreen stuff and just more of a set it and forget it type of products that we always want it to be relevant. But we also just want to make sure that the URLs are always active. And so Hal's done a pretty good job. And so, and his profile in our example is the good, the bad is Paul Ross. And so Paul does not have a profile at all. And so for those of you that don't have one, this is what's coming up. He has 187 Zillow reviews, and you can see kind of LinkedIn, Yelp, and all of that, but nothing's popping up over here. And then let's see. It used to, it went away. his last name's Ross, and so there's a Ross in Bellevue, and so it used to actually get confused with a Ross Dress for Less down here. And so that's the last thing that we want, to happen as well. We want your profile to pop up, as well as let's see. Oh, no, it was on there. Okay. And then this
While
is
you're
Kevin.
doing that real quick, Chad, if you guys
Yep.
have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll address them as we go at the end here. So feel free to post any questions there. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect. And then so this is also the bad. And so Kevin has a profile, but it's very basic. And so he has no hours, he has no photos. Luckily, this building is decent looking. Oftentimes I've seen this be the dumpster in the parking lot outside the brokerage. And so that's not the best photo, that people's first impression of coming up when they're looking up for your business. And so, and oftentimes, and I bets we got what, 23 people in here. I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone in this room right now that it says permanently closed or temporarily closed and you don't know. You might have had, HomeSnap create it at one point and then you stopped paying and then it removed, or you're at another brokerage and they created a profile for you, and then that email is dead. And so we want to make sure that, one, that you have a profile, but then two, also it's looking the best that it can, and it's not, because if that's the first thing that someone sees when it's a referral, you probably won't know about it because they're not going to reach out to you. They're just going to think, okay, well, maybe they're no longer in the business and they're going to reach out to the next agent that they know or the next agent that they were referred to. And so we just want to make sure that, if someone were to come to this page versus a fully built out one, this is just a little bit more encouraging. And so when they're doing that search and doing their comparisons, we want to make sure that your profile stands out and it looks like, you know what you're doing as you are, and just being the expert in the field. And then I saw a couple chats come in to Sean. You were talking about the impact naming. Okay, so yeah, as far as the naming structure, I would be cautious. Google's going to always go off of the city, and so I would not recommend adding in the city that you're in. There's different naming structures that are applied with Google's policy. And so you can't just keyword stuff and say top realtor in Appleton. That's a direct violation. So the way using realtor, it's an actual designation. So kind of like, having the PhD or something like that. You're allowed to put it in the naming structure, but you can't just keyword stuff. And so even just using the brokerage, like you can't be, too creative just on the naming structure if you're using like a team name, that you don't use the team name or anything like that. And so sometimes they might require it being like an LLC, or little things like that. And so just making sure that it's cohesive with your branding as well. You can't just put anything in the naming structure. And then let's see, can you link up the Google business profile with Insta or Facebook for posting? You can't, not directly through Facebook or Instagram. There are some platforms that you can sometimes hook up just to sync with your posting, but there's only a handful of them that actually do that. And then one thing too, so this is with Hal's profile, and he has a good profile. He's got 100, a decent amount of photos, a ton of reviews. He's posting, he's got products, but there's also another step that takes it forward. And so, he's getting beat out, by other people that have less reviews than him, or I think I took that out, and so it moved that. But he was, he's showing up high, but there's also different things that he could be doing to increase that. And so one of those is also just keeping the consistency with the naming structure. And so this is the business citations or business listings. And easy acronym to remember is NAP. So name, address, phone number. The more spots that matches up, the more Google trusted. Right now, you can kind of see Yelp, it's the How Dang team. On his Google page, it's the How Dang real estate team. You and I can tell, all right, well, this is obviously him, but because they use algorithms, they're not sure which one to trust. And so if you guys were to Google, a dry cleaner near you and they sent you to the wrong location, you're like, all right, this is the third time this week that Google sent me to the wrong spot. I'm not going to use Google anymore. And so making sure that you have that consistent naming structure, this is never going to get down to 0%, but this is way too high. And so ideally like to be closer to around 30%. And so the more spots that you're on, the more that Google's going to trust it. And so there's about 30 or 40 to 60 different websites that Google looks at. And some of these websites are a little bit more obscure. Not anyone's really going to eLocal or Go Local 24/7 to find a real estate agent, but Google does. And so the more spots that they see the information, the more confident they are. If I were to ask a question in here just regarding, what's happening with the NAR settlement statement, and I would probably get 20 different answers of, somewhat of the same response, but not word for word. And so that's kind of what they're doing. They're looking out on these different sites, and the more word for word and exact that it matches, the more confident they are promoting it to their clients. And then it's also important just to keep this in sync. And so anyone can come onto your page and, suggest an edit. And so one thing that's nice with the software as well, it keeps that synced up as well, and just making sure that that is super cohesive as well. And then let's see, I got another question that came in. Can my current profile name be changed, or do I need to create? Yes, you can update the new naming structure. You can update the one that you already have. One thing now, especially if you were, switching locations or sometimes switching naming structures or just creating your profile, the Google has made it so much harder recently, just FYI, for creating a page. Before, they used to send out little postcards. You get a little code, enter it in. Now they're switching more to video verification, and sometimes it's more of a live video with someone in India. And so it's been very challenging to get them verified. And so that is just a precursor. I like to throw that out there. The last couple months, they've made it very challenging. And so sometimes it might take a couple tries, but just wanted to mention that as well. And then, so a couple just recaps, on the business page itself. So creating a Google Business profile, but then also having it fully optimized just to stand out, and then keeping the NAP, so your name, address, and phone number, as accurate as possible at as many spots. There's going to be some, on your Facebook, business profile, sometimes they might not allow you to put all caps or use the vertical bar. But the goal is, like I said, to match up in more spots than it is wrong, just to help build that trust. And then also getting just real Google reviews. Google, like I said, they're cracking down on it more than they ever have. And so having actual authentic reviews, and then also just a little strategy too, especially if you get done with
That's
this
at
call,
12:30. Thank you.
especially at if you're going back to past clients and you're thinking, okay, I want to build up my Google page. And then once you send out that link review, typically recommend only sending out max 10 to 20 per week. And so I wouldn't send it out to your whole database, trying to get that all approved right away. And so, like I said, Google likes to see that consistent flow. And so if it's just going down one at a time, just through the alphabet and sending out to your past clients that way, that's a good option. And then especially, responding to all the negative reviews and all reviews in general. But again, that's just a little check mark for them. And then also, Google likes to see the activity on the Facebook or on the Google Business profile, but they also like to see activity on your social media accounts. And so one thing with that is, so now you can add in the social profiles. Before, they used to just automatically be put on there. Google would just look on the internet and just assume, okay, we think that this is your Instagram page. Now you can actually go in and add the URL. But with that, I would just be cautious. I talked to a lot of people, they're like, I have a YouTube account. I want to make sure that my YouTube profile is on there, but they haven't posted a YouTube video in 5 years. And so we want to make sure when people are clicking on here that they see activity. And so the last thing we want them to do is click around and go on your Facebook business page and them see that you haven't posted in a while. And their first thing that's going through their mind is, okay, they're no longer in real estate. And so I'm just going to reach out to the other person. So if you have it listed, and just in general, you want to make sure that you're using it, but especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very untapped market, I think, for a lot of real estate agents. Is one, Google also looks at it as one of the highest ranking social media platforms. You can kind of see here. So for how it's the first social media site that pulls up. For a lot of people that we meet, it's sometimes either the one or two URLs that pop up when people are first looking you up. And so we want to make sure that you have that. And if you think about who's on LinkedIn, It's kind of you know, the ideal clientele and also business referral partners as well. And so having that on there is super important, and just making sure that you're posting. So Facebook business page, LinkedIn, and then also Instagram pro accounts. They like to see the activity, and the ideal naming or consistency is posting at least 4 times a week. And so that's a super important platform to be on there. And then a couple of things, there's different things as well. And I see Renee just asking about issues getting verified. There's a handful of different things that Google might come back with, and some of those being, the Google business profile title not matching with your website, or especially sometimes with agents, there's different, there's multiple agents at the same office. And so sometimes it might just take a couple tries and a couple different things. And they might, push back on a little things, and you might have to create a ticket. That's something that we also help with. And for whatever reason, they've been suppressing them more than ever than they have. But it is all worth it. Just to put that out there. You need to have a profile, and I know it might be a pain just when you're going through it, but you want to make sure that you have a profile altogether. But it might take a couple back and forth, and a little bit of time as well. But any questions that anyone else has that they want to hop on, or anyone feeling confident that they want me to look at their profile?
Chad, I'll fire some questions away. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand, and I'll just do a Q&A with you real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah. And I'll also, while
Okay.
we're doing that, just there's a little QR code there. So if you guys want to have your own personal scan, and I know some people in the team or the class setting don't want to ask a question. So I recommend we offer a free 30-minute consultation that we go over specifically with your brand. So if you scan that QR code, you can book a time just on there as well. So feel free to do that, or just go to the website and book a time there, whatever is easiest for you.
Yeah, definitely encourage you guys to do it. I've done that with Chad, and it was very, very informative, because especially just to kind of see how your profile is set up, where are your blind spots, also to see the citations on, where your Google profile is versus the rest of the sites that it's pulling the data from, and that also will help you with your ranking.
Maybe Chloe ate it. Oh God.
Any
I think there's 2 people that mentioned that they would like their profiles reviewed.
Okay, yeah. Let's see.
In the meantime, who all has found valuable information from this? If you could put in the chat.
Let's see.
Say Tao. Yeah.
Say
Right there.
Tal, what city are you in? Okay. Let's see. There we go. Perfect. Let's see. Yeah. So here's a good profile. And so here's kind of one of the things that I was mentioning with the headshot. So he's got a great headshot, but you can kind of see here just the difference in the sizing. So the more square or rectangle, it's going to take up a little bit more of the uh, real estate over here. And so you don't need to go get new headshots, everyone. You can just crop the ones that you already have. And so just using that sometimes will just make it a little bit bigger. And then you've done a good job adding in, the photos. But I recommend, like I said, getting to that 100 mark. And then right now, kind of got the double headshot going on. And so putting in your own personal logo, or if you have, using the Apex logo on there. And then awesome job getting the 40 reviews. I would recommend, as far as the responses, going a little bit more in depth as well. So like I said, typically, 2 at the very minimum, but ideally like that 2 to 4 range on the review response is what we like to see. And then obviously just, a couple different things to Q&A. It looks like you were posting updates at one point. And so once you do stop posting, they will go away. And so we want to make sure that all of that is staying consistent as well. And so having that all in there it's also just very important on the hyper local SEO content, just having all of those posts consistently going out. It's all going to associate with the location that you're at. And so having all of those keywords on your profile helps when people are doing those searches, as well as the Q&A. And so having that on there as well. And then let's see.
Matthew mentioned it.
Matthew, okay. I was trying to scroll up. And say Tao, we can go a little bit more in depth too. So yeah, Matt, it's a good example. And one thing too, say Tao, as far as just like the realtor, they always like to have it in all caps too, just for compliance reasons. So I always just recommend that. And then Matt, this is great. So yeah, perfect headshot. Like to see, and then let's see, photos, look good. Just obviously, a little bit more. And here's a good example of a good icon logo, especially with the Remax, just using the hot air balloon, just because, it's super small and you can't really see it. And sometimes they'll pull up different spots that they will show it. And then it looks like you're posting, which is great. And then it also looks like you're probably using Home Snap. And then, so this is a good spot too. As I mentioned, the Google Posts or Google Updates, this is an excellent spot to put your listings, or you have an open house. You can have different events. You have a client appreciation event or a first-time home buyer class, that you can also put that on here. And so that's another ideal location to have that on there. And again, just having that consistent flow of stuff coming in is super important. And then obviously the more reviews, and you can having that consistent flow. So it looks like you've been doing a good job getting those in there. And for those of you, I'm sure most people are already doing it, but Google provides a little short URL as well. And so having you don't have to take this long, ugly one. So when you're sending it out to clients, they provide a little shorter one. So it just looks a little bit more appealing. And then also when you're sending out the review, there's a couple just best practices. So ideally like to send it out via email versus via text. If you send it out via email, they're automatically logged into their Google account. If you send it out via text, they're prompted to log in. And oftentimes people are like, okay, I want to leave a review for Matt, but I can't remember my Google password right now. I'll do it later. And they typically don't. And so just having a little bit better, and like I mentioned before, it's difficult enough getting some people to do it. And so that's typically why we recommend just sending out one link versus like a link of 5 different websites. So don't put a Google, Facebook, Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, and Reach 150 and all of that in one spot. People just get overwhelmed. And so we just want to make it as easy as possible for them to actually leave the review. And so typically recommend sending out via email. Obviously you can text it too, and it might take a couple tries and just like, hey, here's that. And also I wouldn't, if they say I did it and it doesn't, and you're like, I don't see it, sometimes it does take a little bit of time to populate. So don't be like, all right, they're lying to me. It could take, a couple weeks for Google to actually post it on there. So I wouldn't be alarmed if they do say that. You can also sometimes create tickets if they say that, okay, it's been a couple months and it's not populating. There's just best practices. It's, a little bit challenging. Sometimes you can't always get every review that people have left, but if you have a rough time frame of when they submitted it, the email address, sometimes you can have a better chance of getting that popped up as well. But like I said, having the authentic review is super important, just has a better chance of having that stay up there, just because they're tracking down, just because there have been so many spam reviews, and Google just trying to make it authentic. And so just using the best practices from there. You can't really coach people, sometimes they're asking, what should I write? Just let them write, but the longer that they write, the more keywords that it's going to have in there. So just let them know, like, hey, just write whatever you want, but the longer the better. You can say something like that, but just having that in there, and then just keeping with the same naming structure. And then it's like we got oh yeah, say Tao, yeah. So all caps on the realtors are kind of like on house. Here's a good example. You don't need to put the whole naming thing in all caps, but just the word realtor. And then, as I mentioned before, you don't need the trademark logo. Google doesn't allow in their policy. NAR's fine with it on sites that don't allow it. So this is compliant both with Google and the NAR Association. And then Brenda. Any other questions while we're doing this? I know some other things will populate. Oh, one other thing let me mention real quick is oftentimes too, especially if you're depending on like you're with a cloud brokerage like EXP or something like that, there is a way to be a service-based business. And so sometimes you don't want the actual address showing, or let's say, like in Melanie's case, she's down in Arizona and her office might be in Tucson, which is, 2 hours away from where she actually is, closer to Phoenix, or something like that. You can use your home address and suppress it. And so whether you're using your home address or even the office location, but you wanted to have a different spots, Google can use your home address and then suppress it. And so it's going to use that city as the main ranking spot, but it's not going to show it to the public. And so having that on there is super important. And then, yeah, so Setao, you can also, whoops, I might edit that. You can either scan the QR code, but I'll also put this in the chat for anyone. You can also copy and paste that, or just scan the QR code. But yeah, that's another way to get around that as well. And so having your home address, and so you can use that as the physical location, just because that's where people are or Google's gonna associate with it. You're not really going to be able to go rank in another city. So Google's always going to use your main city as the number one ranking spot. And as the profile gets stronger, and if there's not many people in the neighboring city, that you might pop up, but it's always going to be that number one location is going to be your number one ranking spot. And then let's see. Let me go. Oh, Brenda, what is your city? Are you in Appleton? Maybe you don't have a profile, or let me know if Appleton, if you want to put that in the chat, or no.
She's in a different state and city.
Okay, there we go. There we go. Yeah. So Brenda, this is a good example. So you're using the service as a business location. So that's kind of what I was talking about. But right now it says that you cover the whole US. And so ideally would like to have it a little bit more specific to your location as well. And typically when you're doing that, want to use cities versus counties as well. So it just makes it a little bit more local focused. You can kind of see here, Melanie, obviously it can be a little bit bigger as well, but ideally just the top 10 cities you would want to have located for your location. And then, kind of similar thing with the naming structure, having it all caps. And then also typically recommend, just taking off the LLC as well. But you've done a good job. It looks like you've been posting. Typically like to have a little call to action down here as well. And so always having some form of call to action, whether it's a call now or learn more, that's taking people to some form of website or your cell. But that's just having that on there. And then, obviously just websites and little things like that. And it's always good to have a website, and especially, and I'll say it's because I'm not on a broker call, but I always recommend, especially if you're at a brokerage where they're clicking on your website, and then if they're clicking around and it takes them off of your page, it might be worth you having just your own personal website, just because, we want to make sure when people are looking for you and they're clicking around that they're not getting lost and it's just not going to the office. And so always want to have some form of website and just making sure that, it's sticking or staying with you as much as it can as well. And then Kevin, let's see, Google Screens. Yeah, Google Screen, that's a good question. Google Screen is just Google Ads. And so these are just people that are paying to be there. It doesn't affect the actual Google Business Profile. And one thing too, if I were to, refresh this whole list just changed, but this stayed the same. And so this is just going to always depend on who's paying for what, and all of that. It doesn't do anything that they've done studies on that it's going to affect your actual organic ranking. So, if you wanted to do some pay-per-click ads, that's the Google screens that they'll have pop up. But as far as the Google Business Profile, it doesn't affect it. And then Renee, oh yeah, so Renee, good question. So having two different offices, with two different cities, there shouldn't be an issue. Sometimes, it might be a little bit different, but with that, we also want to make sure that you have. I would recommend definitely booking a little bit more of a consultation, but you also want to have unique phone numbers and making sure that everything's different. And ideally, like to have a different landing page. And so, if you're sending people to the same website and the same phone number, Google likes to see different, another way for them to identify the two different locations. So if you have two different profiles, always want to have two different URLs. So even if it's this and then the other one's, more on an about or something like that, it can still be, the same website, but just a different landing page. But then also just a different phone number as well, just so that they can differentiate the two. But here is little QR code as well. So again, if anyone wants to book a little bit more time, feel free to hop on. We'll go super in depth just onto your own personal branding. It can go a little bit more in depth on some of those questions if you got more that come up. So got some time later today and then also next week set aside. So feel free to reach out, or you can also email me. My email is just Chad at Optimize5. I'll throw it in the chat too. Or you can also reach out to Tom and he can get us connected as well. But any other questions?
Otherwise, if you could in the chat, if you could put in what are the one or two takeaways that you're looking to implement with Google now that you saw this presentation. And while people are doing that, Chad, quick question for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 17% of the profile or the formula per se, equation is reviews, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So where can you break down the rest of the percentages on what is weighted?
Yeah. So about 35% of it is actually the Google Business Profile itself. And so just having the more filled out. And so, having the appointment links, the Q&A, the pros, all of that. There's also different things that, I don't have them all completely memorized in it, so don't quote me on it exactly. But the business citations, that surrounds another 10%. So having all of that match up, there's different things as well with your website. And so when people click on your website, and that's another thing too, is and why it might be worth having your own personal website versus a brokerage one. They like seeing the website's footer and everything match up to the similar naming structure. So if you're sending them with his information and then it just goes to Windermere Bellevue, they might be confused, be like, okay, well, it says, the how dang, but then this is all Windermere. And so for them, those different variances, and it might be a different phone number, a different naming structure. So the only thing is the address. And so having those little things match up also plays a big factor as well. And then some of the smaller stuff as well as website speed and little things like that, and just the more links that you have. And so those are kind of more on the tail end of things, but Google Business Profile and reviews, those are kind of the top two. And then it kind of just goes down and kind of just best practices from there.
Okay. And for reviews, I thought I heard the stat. Ideally, you want to get to like 10 reviews, ideally as quickly as possible. Is that the number to try to get optimization for your profile?
They've been throwing out, and the numbers has always been changing. I mean, the more reviews that you have, the better. But also just want to be having that consistent flow. And so, you're not going to get everything at one time. And Google knows that, especially, for a real estate agent, like, all right, they know that, all right, they're probably a great agent, but they probably didn't have 10 closings last Friday. And so they like to see that consistent flow. And so having them, going back to your past clients, especially if you're just starting creating a profile, it's important to have that on there. But just moving forward, just as you're consistently getting those transactions and more closings, consistently getting those reviews, having that consistent flow will also help with Google and just for the consumers. And then also, I had something I lost it. I was thinking of something to say with that. Yeah.
While you're thinking, question. So regarding pictures, you mentioned the ideal number is to get to 100, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, 1 or 2 a day is ideal, not like 5 or 10, because then Google will flag that. So that being said, it could be picture of closings or maybe going having coffee with someone. Ideally, from what I heard from other people too, is if you get pictures of other establishments in your surrounding area that you service and upload them, that help them show you be more the local expert in that market?
Yeah, and with photos, it sounds a little funny. So photos is the opposite. Photos you want to get to 100 as soon as possible. Those you can dump in all at once, and then it doesn't hurt continuing on, every month adding in a couple, 5 more photos. And so if you have a new listing, maybe taking the top 5, or like you said, using if you have some stock photos or you're out there at the coffee shop and having some local stuff too. It doesn't have to all be, if this was all 100 photos of just different exteriors of the home, that would get kind of annoying. But you also don't need to go, have a headshot photo shoots and just have 100 photos of yourself. And so having a mix of photos in there helps, just because it has 100 different assets that are all leading back to your name, all leading back to your city. And so it just helps build that trust with Google, and then them constantly seeing those new photos added. So if you have photos of you, putting out your open house signs, or like you said, just in the local area, different restaurants, or you walking in the town there, like those things all help as well. But getting to that 100 mark at first is super important.
Okay. And then for the update section, is
Yeah.
it a best practice to at least put something in once a week?
Yep. Once a week is that ideal target that they like to see. And that's the ideal. It doesn't hurt to post more, obviously. But at minimum, that once a week cadence is what we like to see.
And what about putting like a blog post on your Google profile?
Yeah, so that's a perfect example. So, like if you had an actual, like Gina here, so she has an actual blog post. And so you can take some tidbits from it. And then I guess this one links directly there. And so, yeah, if you have a blog, you can pull it up a little bit and then send people directly to that blog post as well. And you can kind of see here, there's different events that you can throw in there as well, versus just the Google post as well. So if you have specific dates, once that goes away, they'll typically remove it on the Google page itself. But yeah, those are perfect spots. So if you are posting consistently on your blog, another spot that you can link that. And then I saw one from Brenda come in. I do reviews of other businesses from my accounts, and I heard that helps also. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. I haven't heard anything primarily that it will make a big difference, but it's also just another spot for people to see your business name, and see if they see the reviews on there. And so, Google obviously likes people using their platform as well. And so the more that you use it, I always, encourage it. There hasn't been any direct correlation, like, hey, if you leave, 10 reviews, you can become like a local guide and little things like that, which also just, might not do anything on the back end, but just for the consumers, when they're seeing the review from a local guide, it just lets them know that, hey, you know the area pretty well. You're involved in the community and all that. But yeah, that is it. And then, like I said, if you guys want to book a meeting, I know a couple of you have already booked that, and I know we're run over a little bit, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But let me know if there's any questions. Reach out, shoot me an email. We're here to help.
And one last question for you, Chad.
Yeah.
So if they have a new listing, would it be smart to put that under like an update?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I would put it in the update section versus like the products. Products, They're not date stamped. And so you can kind of see here, Gina's done a good job. And so like she has, let's see, this one, or, the open house. One of them is just listed, but this one's under contract, but you could do a similar thing. So, just listed or under contract, then you can link to that specific landing page right there. And so that's typically what we recommend versus posting it on the actual product section. Because this, I can see the date stamp on here, it could have been a home from 2 years ago and it's now under contract and the URL goes dead. As far as the posts and updates after 6 months, these typically fall off. And so at that time, they're typically under contract or sold by that point anyways. And so that's another good spot to have that. And it's not everyone. You have 20 different listings and they could be a buyer that's not interested in any of that. So it's not really pertaining to them. And so we want to be mindful of the products that we do have. You don't want to bombard it with 100 different products. People aren't going to go constantly and look through that. And so trying to keep it, we want to have at least 4. So it brings up this little carousel. But we also want to make sure that it's relevant for anyone. And so just useful links and little links right there to play a big factor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Regarding products, you mentioned putting like a new construction out there and a link to see the new construction that's available. What about also in addition to the home buyer, home seller consultation, home value analysis? What
Yeah.
about adding one maybe at a link for properties 250 and under, or 250 to 500? Just different price point, like
Yeah.
chunk.
Yeah, that's a good example, or even just different cities. And so if you're looking just for properties in Appleton, you could have that. Just depending if people have the IDX platform to use that and you have the landing pages, that's just another way that you can get a little bit more, custom links to those pages as well. Just another spot that you can mention your different service areas, but yeah, price points as well. Brenda, yeah, when you make changes to the profile, will it need to be re-verified? Depends. Google will sometimes trigger a re-verification, depending on what kind of changes that you're making. They don't give an example too much on like, okay, you make this change. So sometimes they might trigger one. There's no set in stone process. Like, sometimes you can change the name, it doesn't trigger it, but sometimes if you're changing, multiple things at once, they might trigger re-verification. But it's kind of just depending on what happens. But awesome. Well, yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me on. And if anyone has any more questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me personally, or obviously Tom as well.